Welcome to GCMR's second podcast discussion. Today we're going to be discussing heritage, culture, and immigration. We're going to be keeping things loose and covering so many different topics, so we're glad that you'll be able to join us and listen in on our conversation. Hello, my name is Maraj.
What's up? My name is Ryan.
Hello, my name is Gregory.
Hi, I'm Charlie.
Okay, so let's get started. I can start off with the first point, and it's just a question just to get us started. How different do you think we are from the kids that are in our, I guess, homeland or where our parents are from?
People from different cultures, you say?
Well, I can give an example. So, my parents came from China, but I'm a first generation immigrant in Canada. And in my opinion, I think I'm very different from the kids in China. And even though, biologically, I'm Chinese, I feel like culturally, I'm very, very Canadian. I feel like there are definitely
I
parts of
see.
my Chinese heritage that are mixed in with a lot of the things I do, but if I went to China, I think I would definitely be an outsider. What do you guys think?
Well,
Yes.
this is really interesting because it really depends on what kind of education you get from your parents, really. A lot of parents choose not to indulge their kids in their culture, in their background, because they think it will maybe make them outcasts in Canada. But I do see a lot of first generation Chinese Canadians who are very in tune with their Chinese culture, and they could just go back there and just work, no problem.
I definitely agree with what you said. So I feel like one thing that manifests itself for me, in terms of how your parents raise you, is language. So my brother spent a lot more time at home before going to Canadian school. So because of that, his Chinese is so much better. My Chinese is deteriorating by the day, and at this point, I feel like my French is stronger. Which, I mean, I don't
Um,
know if it's sad or happy, but it's how it is. So I definitely agree with that. What do you guys think?
I think that embracing your culture is very important, and personally, I feel like an egg
uh,
because
Uh,
oh no.
do you wanna explain that metaphor?
cut that out, cut that out.
No, I
Okay,
mean it's okay. You can explain it. How's it?
I was say one on the outside, yellow on the inside. What's this to say? Wait, other way around. Wait,
Oh,
no.
okay.
No,
Yeah,
you're right.
Banana?
That's the metaphor. Yes.
yeah. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, everything is.
No, you're wrong. The metaphor is the
Yeah,
banana.
it isn't
It's a
wrong. I
banana.
mean, that really is how it is, right? Because biologically, you might look one way, but a lot of your interests or how you might act are another. What do you think, Miraj?
Yeah, I think that honestly, majority of the culture that we're experiencing is not necessarily from our blood, but most likely how we're raised and the conditions in which we're brought up. Because let's say if regardless of your biological ethnicity, if you grow up in a country, it's most likely that you're going to be experiencing a lot of the cultural differences from the country that you're growing up in, rather than the country of your parents. And I think most of the influence will be from your parents telling you stories rather than your blood actually influencing you to become more similar to your original country of your parents' heritage. And for me, I think an example of this would be my parents often talked my language of Tagalog or Filipino very
Mm-hmm.
commonly at home, and that enabled me to pick up the language. And this is very different from my cousins, because my cousins were born in the Philippines and they immigrated at the age of around 10 to 12 years old. But at this stage, they are maybe 5, 10 years later, they're no longer able to speak Tagalog, because even though they have the blood and they were born in that country, if they're not actively practicing their culture, then a lot of the language and a lot of the intricate parts of their culture are lost because they are unable to maintain it actively.
Well,
Yeah.
what I will say is that language is more of doesn't might not necessarily tie in one aspect of remembering your language, because language is sort of like a skill you have to keep. You have to
Yeah,
keep
it's
using,
like
otherwise you
practicing.
will lose it. It doesn't matter if it's part of your culture or not. It's just a skill. It's just like French. I cannot speak French whatsoever right now. Uh, and I also will say that since we are in Canada, Canada's slightly different from countries like maybe the UK or the US. There isn't really this national you're not really proud to be Canadian. At least I'm not. I don't. There isn't really a strong Canadian identity. In fact, I would say multiculturalism is much more supported here. and that's a good thing for immigrants if you want to keep like certain parts of your culture alive in your children.
I think I can see that. Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of the people like that celebrate Canada the most maybe are recently immigrated people. Like if you go to an immigrant's house, maybe, like I know some of my friends, they have like Canadian like merchandise all over their house, flags and everything. So I definitely think multiculturalism is sort of a big part of Canada's pride. And it's kind of weird having not no culture, but like a huge mix of culture being your culture. So I definitely agree with that. Does anyone
Yeah,
else?
I'd actually like to add on to your point where you're talking about how some of the people who are most proud of being Canadian are the people who are like recent immigrants. And I could see that like it's like a very prevalent amongst my own parents who always talk about how fortunate I am to be a Canadian and compare it to how difficult their lives were in the Philippines, living in oftentimes poverty and oftentimes like a lot of difficulties. They talk about imported products, which were like luxuries that we see in our everyday lives. Like for example, my father was eating Pringles, and he's talking about how he was so happy when his relatives came back from America, like bringing these imported goods, because they're like, extremely expensive, and the things that we take like for granted in our everyday lives are often things that are like very limited or scarce within these, or at least within my nation of the Philippines, which is like a developing nation and not nearly as fortunate as Canada. So I think like the circumstances that the people are able to find themselves in within Canada, which are often a lot better than the countries from which they immigrated, like really make them a lot more like have a much greater affinity to Canada and the wealth of this nation.
I mean, I guess that's why like people immigrate, right? Like they want to find like a new life. They want to seek more opportunity. And relating to like your Pringles points, like I know them personally, like in China, right? Like one like scoop of like Haagen-Dazs like ice cream, right? That's like
Mhm.
so much more expensive than like um like
That's
because
not
of Canada.
that's not the point. That's because of like taxes. That's different. Like
Oh really? Oh okay, never mind. No, but like I understand the struggle.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, now that all of you guys are saying this, I'm thinking we might have to rename this episode to like being children of immigrants to Canada, because I feel like that to Canada thing has so much bearing on like our experience as a whole. I mean, then again, there are some countries that are just popular for immigration, like Canada or the United States or Germany, but I feel like that would be an important point to
Canada's just the
talk.
most open to immigration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And it's like
I,
accommodation, not like assimilation.
hmm And I don't know if it's just because we're living in Ontario, but one thing I've noticed is, in my experience, we've been less opposing of immigration than other countries that accept many immigrants, like the United States. What do you guys think
Uh,
of that?
mm. Well, but then you could see like what about like the Syrian refugees, like the 25,000 Syrian refugees? Remember?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Well,
we
a
accepted a
lot of
lot,
people
right?
oppose that.
Wait, I think you cut out a bit. Could you repeat that?
I'm saying a lot of people opposed the Syrian refugees
Mm-hmm.
when they came in. What
What did
do
Greg
you
have to
think
say?
that is? Sorry?
Wasn't Greg going to say something?
Oh, yeah.
Mm. Um, I mean, we did okay. I'm pretty sure Trudeau he let in like a lot of like refugees, right? And like he
Yeah.
gave them like living quarters and like an opportunity to start over, and I think that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Like
think
I
so
don't know.
too. Like I'm not really able to understand like I mean I could understand why, but I think it's very strange for people to like try and shun these like refugees from the nations that are like in like crisis. Because oftentimes, or like not oftentimes, majority of Canada or majority of the population of Canada is composed of immigrants, right? So like a lot of the people have not like were not originally born in Canada unless they're like First Nations or Indigenous people. So to like not allow other people to enter this land, which has made you like so very fortunate, seems very strange to me.
Okay, so I do think that the people who think that refugees, the Syrian refugees, shouldn't have come, they see it from the point of view as like the Americans are the ones who messed up the Middle East, and yet Canadians are the ones that are taking the refugees. Like Americans are clearly very Islamophobic, unfortunately. So like a lot of these refugees have to come here, and that just like obviously that's a great thing for everyone, but like it just doesn't seem fair.
Okay, I've never seen that stance, so that's very interesting. I haven't really thought about it much, So I'm like less familiar with this, but I never thought about it that way, or I didn't know that that was people's thinking. So, Miraj, what do you think of that? Because you are very like
Yeah,
caring
from my
about.
perspective, like I was thinking that majority of people were opposed to the refugees because, or from what I've heard, is because like we're going to be providing them with shelter, and it's like our taxes. So it's not necessarily instead shifting the blame towards America, but rather saying that they wouldn't like support these people with their tax money, and they're saying that they're like burdens to society, which I'm unable to comprehend, or like that I'm unable to see eye to eye with.
Yeah, which is not true. Immigrants work harder than the people
Yeah.
who are in the country originally. Immigrants have shown to have lower crime rates. Immigrants are productive to every country.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay, um, let's try to investigate something else, I guess. How many of
Mm.
your friends would you say are like from the same heritage?
Uh,
Almost all of them.
you want to say Chinese, don't you?
Okay, not. I don't even want to say Chinese because it becomes this question of, are we gonna categorize like similar culture as in we can just say East Asian or like Southeast Asian? Is Southeast Asian and East Asian
No, they're
similar
like
enough? It's hard to say, so I'm
no.
trying to keep it vague.
Oh, I mean, if you just say like Asian in general, that's a lot of people. Even
Yeah,
if you say Chinese, that's a lot of people still.
sure. Okay, let's go with country. Let's just go with only countries. So, in your friend group, how many people are Chinese? Or for Mirage, Filipino, for that matter.
I mean, I guess I can speak on for like myself as a Filipino.
Hmm.
Within like the neighborhood that I grew up in, there are very few other Filipinos. So the only Filipinos I'm friends with are family friends, and to that extent, it's like I have basically zero Filipinos within my friend group that I'm usually talking to, and
Mm.
even then, I think it's like I'm not sure if it's the same with you, but I noticed like there are a lot of other people from different friend groups that have like a lot of similar nationalities. Like I have Romanians in my friend group, and they're
Hmm.
able to actively practice like their culture because they are with other people who share their culture. But because I'm not with nearly as many like Filipinos, I noticed that I'm not able to like practice the Filipino traditions or the Filipino language to nearly a great extent compared to people who are able to do so because they have a lot more other people within the friend group of the same nationality.
Okay. Um, I mean, I don't know how related this is or if I'm even getting to the point of it, but I had not met a single Filipino person before I came to St. Robert.
Really?
So yeah, I
That's
had not
interesting.
met a single. Yeah, so I think it's our school is a really big factor, of course, in like the nationalities of the people that we interact with. So my elementary school was pretty similar to St. Robert. There were a lot of like East Asian people and a lot of people from the Middle East, but I had
Yeah.
not met a single Filipino person. So when I did come to St. Robert, I thought, wow, there's so many Filipino people, right?
Oh.
I so I thought Mirach's answer would be different, but I guess I'm unfamiliar on this. What do you think of like being a Filipino person and uh, or like having a Chinese friend? Like, how do you think the cultures are similar or different?
Well, geographically, like they're located fairly close to each other in like that part of the world. But in terms of differences, like one of the main differences that I notice is sometimes when I'm hanging out with Chinese friends, like they won't talk like Chinese in front of me. But I feel like when I am not around, like they're more free to talk in like a mix between English and Chinese if they would so like to do so. So I
Hmm.
wouldn't really say that it's like making me more tense or anything, but it's just I would like to be able to speak like Filipino with my friends, but even though I'm not able to do so, I feel like it's not necessarily that great of a barrier as because like we speak English within Canada as a main language or even
Hmm.
French.
Hmm.
Being able to interact with people like outside of my own nationality or outside my parents' nationality really isn't that different other than language as much of the cultural practices are not really present in like day-to-day interactions.
Hmm. Okay. Uh,
Right.
Greg or Charlie, do you want to add anything?
I feel like my situation is like a lot different from Mirach's because I feel like almost my entire friend group is Chinese or East Asian for that matter, and I feel like it's pretty easy to like talk with them, relate to them. Like I noticed near like every Chinese New Year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm often like, oh, how much money are you getting? You know, like as a joke, right? And then like
Yeah.
they also like they also understand like the same humor, and then like I don't know, like cultural differences are like not really present.
Mm-hmm. Charlie?
Okay, so what I will say is that like for Chinese people specifically, there's so many Chinese people in Canada and around the world specifically because like China has just had this huge economic boom, which allows people allows people to actually immigrate because you need to have a certain level of wealth to be able to immigrate to most countries. And like that's the big reason why there's a lot of Chinese people like everywhere. But regardless of that, like a lot of people you see like speaking Chinese like to each other, they're not actually, I wouldn't call them immigrants because they're exchange students essentially. They come here, they go to university, and then they go home and they work in China because as of now the job market is better in China. I wouldn't count them as Canadians essentially. And I would say most Chinese Canadians don't even speak Chinese that well.
Yeah, I'm in that category.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I definitely do. I see what you're saying. Like, the transfer students at our school are probably much more in tune with like Chinese culture than, uh, I mean, those of us that have lived in Canada for the majority of our lives. So I really think there's a huge difference, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause they're not Canadian, they're Chinese.
Yeah.
Fully.
Okay, what do you guys think of like food?
Of what?
Food?
Food? So what do you eat at
Food.
home? What
Oh,
would you
I see, I
want to
see.
eat the most often? And I don't know, just I love talking about food, so this is
Of course.
fun. Yeah. I can start off, I guess. I think I like only eat Chinese food at home. I mean, if
Yeah,
we go to
same.
Costco or get something like croissants or like just random bread, then we're gonna eat that too. And there is like some other things we eat, like I don't know. I feel like apples are very Canadian. So
Are
like stuff
they?
like I
Oh
think
no.
so. They're able to survive the cold climate. I've always been so proud of apples because like
Okay,
while other
okay.
fruits are just exclusive to relatively hot and
Most
humid areas,
Canadian. I never thought of that.
I'm not sure if they're Canadian, but they can definitely withstand the cold. Like they're
I
one of
see.
those fruits that you won't see like oh I don't know from Mexico
From
or like some other
California.
tropical area, yeah, or California, yeah. So
Not very seasonal, huh? Yeah.
yeah, I guess that also ties into where you go for groceries. My parents always go to like an Asian supermarket and also Costco. What about
I
you
see.
guys?
Well, yeah, of course food
Well,
is a big part of. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yes, you can go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say that of course food is a big part of culture, but like I personally kind of like I enjoy like a mix of East Asian cuisines. I feel like as I am Chinese, I also enjoy the other East Asian cuisines. You know, it's easy to branch
Mm,
out. For
yeah.
example, I have kimchi in my fridge. Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay. Yeah, that's definitely interesting because obviously, if those cultures are in such close proximity, there's going to be a lot of similarities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not gonna lie, I haven't tried pho like ever. Like I know it's something that almost everyone has tried, but I think it's my favorite. Like, it's one of my favorite East Asian noodles that I've ever had. Like,
Mm.
it's probably one of my favorite. What do you guys think? Is your
I think
favorite
on
food
your
from
thing.
is your favorite food from your home country? Can you even decide on a favorite food?
I mean, I think it's like either duck or like hot pot. So,
Oh,
like,
so that's a yes, right?
Wow.
that's a yes. Yeah.
Okay. Mirach, what about you?
Yeah, well, for me, I think like my favorite food probably wouldn't be from my own country, as like we don't have too many dishes that are as good in Canada, because like a lot of the dishes within the Philippines are like, or a lot of the well-known dishes are would be like, let's say, street food or celebrational food that
Mm-hmm.
aren't really practical to cook with ingredients that we have available here. So
Okay.
majority of the food that I eat would like, or that I'm commonly exposed to, is food that is uh, like more popular in Canada. Like let's say like Japanese food or like let's say Italian food that become like spaghetti at home or something like that. So not necessarily cultural dishes. And I think it's like because of that, or lack of availability of the same ingredients, or like they're more expensive here, that I've become more accustomed to food that is more popular within Canada, not necessarily like Filipino food. And I have this like, and I land on majority of my favorite foods being not from the Philippines.
Well,
Okay.
I think my favorite foods are like steak and like sushi, which is not Chinese at all. But I want to go on a tangent and say that I recently went to a Chinese hot pot place, which is like a branch of like the actual restaurant in China, right? And like experiences.
How do you know?
Yeah, how do
No,
you
Okay, is that
so I'm just gonna say the experiences there is very Chinese, right? Like the service is very Chinese. You have very good service. Like people just like come to your table like every 5 seconds, and it's really interesting to see how like even more like further parts of Chinese culture like slowly like immigrating as more people come here. I just want, yeah, I just wonder if that would happen for other cultures as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess we can work on having Heidi Lau sponsor our third episode, and
Oh
maybe
yes.
we get some hot fire, you know? But, okay, I guess one thing as well is, what do you guys think of, like, immigrant work ethic?
Immigrant.
Because, I don't know, I was kind of taking from what you guys were talking about before, as in, like, it's kind of hard to talk if all of your friends are from a different country or, like, speak a different language, but also that immigrants just work really hard. I think all of you have probably gone to Olympiads, and I don't
No,
know. No? Okay,
no.
well,
Yeah, I
it's
didn't have
something
one.
that is actually becoming mainstream. That's so crazy because like in my mind, it was always this like underground, you know, I don't know, underground school where people took classes that were like 3 levels higher, but it's slowly becoming mainstream. Like, well, one of my school teachers knows what Olympiads is, and that's so crazy. I would have never expected him to know. But one thing that I always noticed was in Olympiads there would be predominantly East Asian people, or I think most Chinese. I mean, I can't be sure just from appearance because okay, I don't mean to. It's hard to tell the difference in my opinion, but there'd be a majority of East Asian people, and then there would be some South Asian people and Middle Eastern, and as well some white people. So what I noticed was some of the time the teacher would make jokes like that are very South Asian or like even just speaking in South Asian, and then I always in the back of my mind like I laughed, but like I was always kind of feeling bad for the people that might not understand the joke because it's in another language. So I don't know, that's one thing. But how do you think this sort of immigrant work ethic is shared among everyone that immigrates, regardless of culture difference?
Well, I would say it's purely financial. It's entirely financial. Like, immigrants are proven to be better educated, have better education than like just the regular people in that country. And it's because immigrants have the financial means to come here, which means they know the importance of education. From what I understand, I believe like Nigerian immigrants are actually they perform the best in school. Because to be able to immigrate from Nigeria to like a big country, you have to be so much more well off than your average citizen in Nigeria that you just understand the importance of education and money and like stuff like that, you know? It just means that because you have this financial like somewhat financial stability to some degree, you're able to like prioritize education over something like maybe over someone who maybe just has to come out of high school and get a job. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay.
I never knew that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think that is very interesting. I do think that immigrants, like, okay, like, I know we said here like avoid cultural differences and stuff, right? But I think culture also plays like a huge part in like your work ethic. I mean, like I don't know, like you go to like a different country to start like a completely new life, right? And then to like achieve your goal, you have to like work like hard, right? So like,
Hmm.
I guess it makes sense why they have very strong work ethics.
Yeah, I think so. So like that onto what you guys are saying. Like in order for people to immigrate here, they have to be like the top of their own countries in order to be able to have like the stats to get enough points on the immigration or application process so that they could be accepted. And I think that could also like build onto the stereotype that a lot of cultural minorities are like super hardworking, and that's not necessarily because like everyone from that culture is like hardworking, as I'm sure that there are like also the people who are like who don't work nearly as hard and that are like from that nation, but it's because that they're like able to work hard and they're able to make it here that they pass on that work ethic to their children that gives off like the stereotype of a lot of these people or a lot of cultural minorities being extremely hard workers.
This idea of hard work is not necessarily healthy either. Just like you see, like Japanese people being stereotypically hardworking is like is a result of their toxic workplace and the fact that they are forced to stay overtime and work. It's not necessarily a good thing. We should, in fact, maybe we should like steer away from these type of stereotypes and look toward maybe like more worker benefits, stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like, I constantly talk with my parents about, like, I don't know, I mean, just China and stuff, because I find it interesting. I mean, I feel like my perspective is that of an outsider, but even so, I find it interesting. And, like, the work ethic, or even the toxic work environment of a lot of these countries, and just, I mean, the high pressure situation of school, like, that's a common topic. But, like, school in China or, like, Japan or South Korea, I could never. I don't think I'd survive.
I mean, okay, I think it makes sense for them because they have like one test, right? That basically dictates like your entire future, right? Because like, we have like applications and stuff, right? Like they have
Yeah.
like one like SAT basically, like it's called like Gaokao, right?
Yeah,
And then
or
like
like Suning, right?
your score just dictates what university you go to. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
What do you think?
they go in like the opposite direction of us. Like we start off like having school like very easy, like very like relaxing, right? And then like it comes harder and harder, right? I feel like in China and like these other East Asian countries, it starts off like really hard, right? And then like in university, it's like super chill.
Okay. I'm not too familiar with how university works. Can you like
Oh,
describe it?
I'm not sure that.
Oh,
So
not sure either. Okay.
No, yeah, Chinese universities are like notoriously easy. You just go there and you party, you do nothing.
Oh, okay. Well, the more you know, I guess. I never knew. I thought it was just hard like your entire life, but I guess there is light at the end of the tunnel. 'Cause-
true.
I mean, it's not necessarily a good thing. It's like it's definitely a problem. It should be the other way around. It should be the way it is here.
Mhm. Okay. We're going off on a really strong tangent here, but
It's okay. It's fine.
I think it's somewhat related because school, play, balance, stuff like this. And this is from like my home country, I guess. I think all of you have probably heard of it, but China's implementing a rule where kids
Oh,
under
video
18,
games. Yeah,
kids
I
under
saw it.
18 are restricted to 3 hours of gaming per week. Do you think something like this could happen in Canada, or do you think it's something? Yeah.
I don't think they have like the legal power to do something like this. Actually, I don't know.
Oh, but I
Obviously, I mean,
think within like Canada and the like United States, there's like there may not be like too strong of like a nationalistic sentiment within Canada. One of the things that Canadians like are really proud of, maybe not to as great an extent as Americans, but something that we are certainly proud of would be like our liberty, right? Our freedom.
Yeah.
So I think people might be aggravated and strongly oppose like the limitation of activities that they would be able to enact. So putting restrictions on gaming like 3 hours of a week would probably not be taken very well by a great number of Canadians.
hmm And that also just reminds me of like so many policies that you can avoid by immigrating to a different country. Like, I mean, the one-child policy was only abolished pretty recently in China, right? I think when I was born, it was still in place. So if my parents had not immigrated, I probably wouldn't have existed, you know?
it's actually 3-child now, by the way.
Yeah, it's three
Yeah.
child. I mean, I guess we're moving a bit too far now, but I think that probably won't solve the problem because there's really no incentive to have more children in China as of right now, right?
Oh yeah, this is too expensive.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any topics to bring up?
Uh, I mean, we
I-
could talk about heritage if you would like.
Okay. You can start us off.
I mean, like heritage in like a historical sense.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
you know how like in terms of Chinese people, it's really interesting because the country is new, the heritage is very old. Do you think that has any like? Do you think the heritage really has any impact on you?
Heritage as in like.
As
Can
in
you give us
like dynasties. You know what I mean?
Oh,
dynasty? Okay.
I don't know.
Is that all just forgotten, or is just like history? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I won't be able to speak like for the Chinese people, but I think for the Filipino people, apparently we had like a very rich heritage, and we had our like own language and alphabet or character system. But that all changed with the Spanish Inquisition. And like after being conquered by like a lot of European nations, I feel like a lot of the Filipino culture has been lost and like altered to be a lot more congruent to what we have like within Canada. So I think that like Philippines is like it could be compared to like a much worse off version of North American nations because of like the strong influence or like Eastern nations or Western nations, sorry. And because of that, like my heritage has not necessarily been strongly impacting me, rather just supporting a lot of the things that or a lot of the values that we see here within Canada.
Mm-hmm. I heard about Filipinos like history and like all the different countries that have had an influence, and yeah, I don't know. I guess I never thought of it like as seeing as like a less well off Western country, but in terms of culture, I guess I can kind of see that. I've never thought about it that way. That's actually pretty cool. I mean, when you talk about like dynasties and stuff, that stuff is so ancient, and it's probably very different from even the China that my parents grew up in. But I mean, if it stands for anything, once there was like an ancient Chinese exhibit at the ROM, and I think I went exclusively for that. Like, I mean, I enjoyed the rest of the museum, but like, my family friends took me and my brother there just to check that exhibit out, because I think I don't know, with China it's complicated, but I find it's sort of like you can dislike the government, but you still like love your country, right?
Mm,
And it might be
that's
generous
interesting.
for me to say, oh, I love my country, because I'm definitely like very Canadian and like less Chinese, I guess. But it's really like I saw it as part of China, basically, those dynasties. And even though it was split into many different parts, and it probably wasn't all uniformly just China, I think the heritage is like still under that one country. I think not claim it, but appreciate it as part of that one country, you know?
I see.
Yeah. Okay, I can bring up something else. How do you think, um, this is about culture in general, not necessarily
Yeah, yeah.
immigration, but I found something really interesting, and that's about how culture manifests itself in different things. And the one thing I'm going to be specifically talking about here is video games. So
Mm,
I saw a video, and I mean, there aren't any sources to back this up, so this is just probably a hypothesis,
yeah.
but there are two different types of pretty major esports. So there are, of course, like FPS esports, so games like Counter-Strike or Siege or Valorant. And with those games, the strongest competitors are Western nations. So that's going to be countries like North America or like countries in North America or in Europe. So in Counter-Strike, for example, uh, North America isn't bad. Countries like Denmark or like Germany or Sweden constantly dominate, while games like MOBAs, so like multiplayer online battle arenas like League of Legends or Dota, or I think you could even call StarCraft a MOBA, are very highly dominated by Asian countries. And the reason for that, or as the video said, the reason for that is because of the different sort of cultures there are. So I feel like Western civilizations are much more individualistic, and your success in those games are really highly dependent on you as an individual, while games like League of Legends or Dota are highly dependent on the team as a whole. So if you have one weak link, you can't succeed at all. And what's really interesting, and what I found, is there are games like Overwatch, which although in nature, like in mechanics, it's a first-person shooter, the gameplay more resembles a multiplayer online battle arena where there's a lot of teamwork. So, do you guys agree with this? Do you guys think this makes sense? I think this makes sense so much.
I think I have to disagree like to a slight extent because when you look at these first person shooter games, the games that you mentioned, or at least what is this? CS:GO? Did you mention that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure like games like that are also like multiplayer games. So I think like there is a cultural influence, but instead of focusing it on like people working together or working alone, because I think majority of these video games involve teams of players that have to coordinate in order to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of this can be like derived from the games that they played before video games. So I think within like Eastern nations or Asian nations, we see a great popularity of like board games that are strategy based. Like you have Go, you also have games like chess, which like originated within like the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's because like the strategy base that a lot of these people have grown accustomed to, that as in video games were being like implemented, that these people who used to play strategy based video games were more willing to take them on. Whereas within Western nations, where the strategy based board games were not nearly as popular, they were instead like diverged and chose to take on first person shooters, which are more like based off of like physical or mechanical talent rather than like strategy, which is popular within or popular from board games.
I see. That's really interesting. I could see that
Yeah.
too. What do you guys
I
think?
think I agree with Raj.
Okay, Charlie, what did you have to say?
Yeah, I also agree, and I think I'm adding on to that. I think that another part of it is that like first-person shooters are just in general more violent. Well, just because you're actually like it's like full screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think East Asian countries are more adverse to that violence, especially in China, where a lot of violence is actually censored. So I feel like that's a big reason why it may not be as popular, and just because like they have a smaller player base as a result of this distaste for violence, there's just like there's just less teams, you know?
Oh, okay. I actually didn't know that that sort of censorship on violence was a thing. So I think that okay, that honestly might be the most concrete explanation in my opinion, because if there's a law you can point to and a statistic like a player base, then I think it makes sense.
Hmm.
Do you think this sort of maybe differences in experience? So like strategic games versus mechanical talent, like Mirage brought up. Do you think that manifests itself in other things?
Mm.
I mean, I guess it's a hard question. It's like not
I don't
many
know.
easy answers.
The art of war.
Okay,
True.
one thing I can bring up. So I believe there is I think there is a Chinese runner in the Olympics this past summer who did quite well on like 100 meters dash, and although he didn't win anything, I think it was like historically good.
Yeah.
And a lot of comments from like an Asian perspective, I'm gonna assume, were like commenting about how unprecedented this was because Asian countries are like stronger in like technique based sports like diving or
Yeah,
gymnastics or
diving.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
and not as strong as what am I even saying, in like pure mechanical ability sort of sports like running,
Correct.
which was why
Yes.
this performance was so impressive from that one individual. So what do you guys think on this?
I think they're just simply built different. Uh, like the muscular structure is like better for like I don't know more precise movements. I don't know. I literally think they're built different. By the way, uh,
Hmm.
I mean otherwise there wouldn't be such a big trend. Like China has put a lot of money into sports, and yet they've not won that much in track. It's
Yeah.
definitely like physiological. I think. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I can agree with that. What do you guys think? I
Oh
mean,
yeah. I think that's true too.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how like the Olympics are treated in other countries, but I feel like China does put a lot of money into it, you know? Despite
Yeah.
us not doing historically well in like just pure physical ability.
I mean, I
I
think China
also
does do pretty well, like in general, though.
hmm one thing I've noticed, and this is kind of relates back to the video games point. I think the Olympics and like athletic excellence in China is kind of like a way to break out from the conditions in which you were born in. So if you're a really poor kid in China and you don't have much going for you, like it's hard to make a good life, right? Or maybe not a good life, but a life where you have a pretty decent income and are comfortable. But I've heard if you can make it in the Olympics, if you do well in the Olympics, then your life will be turned around because the Chinese government just supports these things and so much money is put into it and there's so much prestige attached to achieving in the Olympics. And because of that, there are so many Chinese youth that just constantly go to these Olympic facilities where they're basically factories for just Olympians. So I feel like this, along with video games, is kind of like one of those breakout things that even though your conditions might not be good in the beginning, if you can excel at it, it's life changing. And that's why I also think, although limiting video games might be a good thing in some aspects, what if there is that one talent that I don't know might not have grown up with the best conditions or might not have had the best luck in his upbringing, but could have changed his fate with becoming a professional in video games or something. What do you guys think?
I mean, don't you need like a computer to play games? So it's kind of
I'm
Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure since internet cafes are much more prevalent, it's actually affordable. It's not where you need to have a certain level of like wealth to be able to play games. And I feel like it's like an escape. So, I mean, people might just use their money on it as well. Yeah,
wait, but like
Greg, were you
um
telling me about like FPX, the team? I'm
uh
pretty sure I watched the video or something.
okay.
I think one of their players like had that story. So he
No,
wasn't
no, no, no.
born.
That's Huang Feng from Suning Gaming. Yeah, someone else.
Oh, okay, but was it like one of these breakout things where he wasn't born with the best conditions?
I think his parents got like divorced or something, and like he got like abandoned. But like yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So
So,
I don't know. Like
mhm,
he has like a certain level of like financial like opportunity, you know. So like
yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Like it's pretty rare in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
that is
like
true.
I mean,
playing
like a lot of these policies are just very, very reactionary. Like China often bans very like minute things on the internet, and then they just take
Yeah.
it back a week later. You know?
Yeah. I think there's something similar in Korea where you aren't allowed to play games from 12 to 6 and that was abolished pretty
Oh, shit.
recently, like the Cinderella rule or something. I think that was abolished in 2021. So, who knows? Might do the same thing. I mean,
oh my
we'll have to
that's
see
like
them.
my G1 license. I can't drive from 12 to 6.
Oh, true. Yeah, true.
Wow, great reference, dude.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, driving at that time is so hard anyways. So,
True.
I mean, if you're trying to,
Can
good
imagine.
luck. Is there anything else
Alright, but
that, yeah?
this is like a tangent, but like relating to like the sports and like um compensation from the government.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think like okay, like the China they had Tren Hong Chan, I think, right? And like she got like the gold medal for diving, right? And she was like 14, and like and she had like very like unfortunate circumstances. Like she won, and like her family got like a lot of money. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
like that really shows how much China prioritizes like these sports.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, if I could like jump back to something that Ryan was saying earlier. Like
Yep.
he expressed a concern, like what if there's someone who could have made it like to become a pro game or like professional in like the gaming or esports like scene, but like they weren't able to because of, let's say, like the ban on games like 3 hours a week. And like if they're unable to do that. And I think like this like is a concern, but it's like probably a very minor concern. And I think like the difference between grinding out on like a video game compared to grinding out in like a real life sport in terms of like how successful you can, or like to what extent you can be able to find success like in a professional league. I think that one of the main differences would be like who's facilitating like your grind, because a lot of the times I noticed like within these factories, as you said, like within China where people are being like examined and being trained to become Olympic athletes, like a lot of the time that they're spending there is like regulated by professionals and like let's say maybe their parents to a certain extent. And because of that, like if they aren't able to make it to like the Olympic scene, then it's much more likely that they're going to be dropped and like someone will stop them so they can pursue other things in life. However, if we're looking at video games, a lot of this will most likely be facilitated by the child themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So they may not be able to see like when they're like when they have reached their limits and when they're no longer able to become like a professional. So I think like to this extent, like it's much more likely that they might spend a lot more time on a video game that may never yield rewards if they are trying to like push for themselves, rather than if they're professionals who are like monitoring them and seeing if they'll actually be able to make it, so they can be like a little more certain that they're using their time for this sport, like they're using this time effectively and that it could yield possible returns.
Yeah, that's. I didn't really think about that. I think that's really important too. So yeah, I guess you're right about that point. One thing too is I guess this is more related to like just globalism and China, I guess as well. With the sort of ban on video games, not outright, but limiting the amount of time that you can spend, do you think that will have ramifications over here? So Tencent, which is a Chinese company, right, owns huge shares of so many different programs that we use in Canada, and even I think Riot Games is partially owned by Tencent. So do you think that will be moderated over here? Because there's something where I think this is the way they're going to enforce the rule as well, is your ID is connected to your account, right? That's how they can monitor those things. WeChat is already like that. If you want to send payments using WeChat, you need to have a Chinese ID. Because I remember I was trying to receive payment because I wanted to buy something, but I couldn't because I didn't have a Chinese ID. Do you think this sort of restriction will have any effect on us here in North America, or do you think it's local to China?
Obviously not. Like they're not stupid. They understand that they need to cater to the Western audience. Like they know what they have to do.
And
Rarely will Chinese policies actually affect like regular people in the West. Like maybe it might affect Western shareholders, but like that's it.
Mm-hmm. Greg, were you gonna say something?
And I think like these big companies, they have like multiple subsidiaries, right? And they control like different aspects of the thing, like of the company. So like and I feel like wait, I forgot. Wait,
It's
I
okay.
forgot my train of thought. Yeah, no.
That's okay. I mean, either way, I hope this policy doesn't have any ramifications for us here in North America.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Well, we could go back to immigration. Would you like to?
Sure.
Uh, would you like to talk about the First Nation issue? Because they are technically the first people who are here. Everyone else is an immigrant, and especially with the election coming up, I'd say it's a pretty important issue. And I believe they uncovered some unmarked graves recently as well, somewhat recently.
Yeah. That's definitely like a controversial issue to bring up.
Yeah.
I mean, we're ultimately we're the ones benefiting from, I guess, colonization, right? So there's a lot that has to be acknowledged, and there's a lot of reparations that need to be done. In terms of voting, could you elaborate what you said?
Yeah, well, like most parties, well, I'd say like the liberals and the conservatives at the very least don't really have a platform on this. And a lot of First Nations like committees, like they support the liberals, unfortunately, but I'm just saying,
Controversial. I'm joking.
I'm just saying that it's ironic that we are a country of immigrants, yet we treat the people that were originally on this land so poorly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I do agree with that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is like the first step of like reparations? I mean, I don't think what the government has done in the past has been sufficient to make up for what has happened. What do you guys think? Especially with so much of the newer knowledge that's coming out right now.
I mean, definitely, I think they must fix like the reserves because I remember like those reserves have like so many problems, like
Mm-hmm.
whether it be like adequate like conditions or like I don't know, like I feel like the biggest issue is that like they don't have like that much opportunity to reintegrate into like our like Canadian like a tertiary society, right? And they don't like and like their reserves are just like not like high quality, so they kind of just like lose.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Like the government just isn't willing to spend that money because the reserves are so far from our major cities. It just wouldn't benefit us economically, but like it needs to be done. They need to
Yeah.
have the ability to stay there if they want to, but also they do need monetary reparations in the same way that slaves should be given monetary reparations because of the way they've been inherently oppressed for generations. They just have less opportunity economically.
Yeah. I think I was talking to like I don't know how to say it, like a mentor or like a teacher in the past, and they were talking on this issue before, and they brought up a point like, would people be concerned about the cost for a city like Richmond Hill, or even a city
Yeah,
with a smaller population, as remote? Would people be concerned about the cost? I don't think they would be. So we have to really think, why is it only for these reserves that we're so concerned about the cost of these necessary things, really, these basic living conditions that need to be met, right?
yeah.
hmm Does anyone else have anything else to add? Okay, if not, we can end our episode here. We're
Okay,
so glad for everyone that has
wonderful.
been listening in so far, and we can't wait for you guys to watch in on our next episode.